Bill Gates, this childhood habit helped me end up a billionaire. It was crucial to my success later on. So there's Bill Gates right there. And as we can see, we're going to find out. Okay, let's find out what his childhood habit was. Bill Gates isn't sure he would have become a billionaire if he'd grown up like kids today, dealing with the distractions of smartphones and social media. Now, I will say, I'm not sure what he means because, you can read. There's plenty to read online in smartphones. So I don't know. I guess if you really wanted to, I would say that in today's world, it like we get there's a lot of advertisements. There's a lot of ads. There's plenty of news articles. I would say that the news articles are longer than they need to be. So I would say it's the opposite. But I understand what Bill Gates is saying. The only thing I would agree with him on is that the quality, I guess, is not very good. Okay, a lot of it just seems automated. It just seems, the news articles and whatever you read on phones today, the social media, it tends to be very formulaic, if that makes sense. It's not, it doesn't have, it seems almost like it's, written without any creativity. But I could be wrong. Obviously, every once in a while you'll see some interesting things, but a lot of it is just formulaic. It's like the same thing over and over. And so there's not a lot of thought put into most. And so I actually don't read most advertisements. I don't pay attention to it. So I agree with Bill Gates in that today it's not quite the same as when he was young, right? So Gates, the co-founder and ex-CEO of Microsoft, helped make computers and the internet ubiquitous. But he might never have built the tech giant valued at $3.26 trillion as of Wednesday afternoon without the time he spent growing up roaming around. Okay, so here's where he tells us what he did. Roaming around with friends, exploring the outside world, and reading and thinking deeply in his room for hours at a time. Now, we can still do that, by the way. In fact, I still see a lot of kids roaming around and exploring. So I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. I actually think this generation of people, they're more active than say the millennials or Gen X, I would say. They kind of are. They're not, some of them are locked in, but a lot of, you'd be surprised. When I walk around, I see a bunch of teenagers just running around. So I don't think that's a problem, actually. If anything, they're running around too much with those scooters. I always feel like that's not safe, in my view. I wouldn't let my kid ride a scooter if I had one. But anyway, what I did like is where Bill Gates is saying, where he would read and think deeply in his room for hours at a time. Now, this is something that I think kind of comes close to heart with me because I believe that is a great, that's the only way to become a philosopher, in my view. It's the only way to think, to learn how to think. So it doesn't really matter what you read, to be honest with you. Just that you are able to analyze and think and criticize and use your mind, essentially. Just like kind of like a jungle gym, right? In a physical way, but in a mental way. To be able to play with the world around you and think about concepts, and that comes with being able to think about things. And that happens when you have hours to think and practice that skill. And so in a way, the thinking skills is what I think Bill Gates is talking about. And this is something I agree with. So when I felt restless or bored or got in trouble for misbehaving, I would disappear into my room and lose myself in books or ideas, often for hours without interruption, Gates wrote. This ability to turn idle time into deep thinking and learning became a fundamental part of who I am. He added, it was also crucial to my success later on. So, the thinking is important. And I think a lot in today's world, people are afraid to think. Like the whole point is you need um, you need to be able to disagree with what you're seeing in front of you, and you need to be able to think of alternatives, and you need to be an active participant in your life. And so I agree that in order to reach, because what ends up happening is that the reason why Bill Gates is saying this is because as you get, presumably, right, as you become older and as you start doing important things, you become a leader, you learn, so you have the ability to create and do something. Well, you're going to be using your mental skills, your thinking skills are going to come into play. Because if you don't think, or if you're not used to thinking about things for hours and finding solutions, or criticizing it, or trying to figure out what's happening, what's in front of you, that's what analysis is. If you're not able to do that, then first of all, you're never going to come up with anything new. And secondly, you'll always just do what's already been done. And thirdly, you're not going to have any power. You have no power at all. You can do things and that might get you somewhere, but it's not going to get you to that creative level, to that next level, because you're not used to thinking about this. So Bill Gates, essentially, I agree with him on this, that in life, if you want to think things, if you want to be able to create something and actually be able to learn how to manipulate the world around you, you must be able to think. You must be able to think about things, and you must be able to take whatever is happening and then make it your own, or analyze it. And that requires spending a lot of times being bored. So in a way, he's kind of contradicting himself, because he's saying, you got to be roaming outside. And I think that contradicts what he's saying right now, actually, because thinking and being outside are two different things. You can't do both at the same time. And even though, yes, you need a little bit of balance in life, but generally speaking, you have to go through that thinking phase, and not enough people go through it, in my view. So even if you can be, what's crazy is that you can participate with media, and you can read, and you can do all that and still not be able to think. So I don't know that I agree with Bill Gates in the sense, in some ways I do, but in some ways I don't, because the thinking is a separate action. You actually don't need to read to think, to be honest with you. You don't need to, all you need is just the ability to sit down and philosophize. You actually don't need a book to do that. And you don't need, and I think the Greek philosophers, a lot of them, they didn't do that. They weren't reading books. They were literally sitting around and just observing the world around you. So really, thinking is a different thing, actually. It's separate from reading. Yeah, reading can help you. It can, it allows us, to sit in a place and expose ourselves to ideas that are not in front of us. But you don't need books, actually, to do this. And so it's a separate thing. But I get what he's trying to say, because that's how he thought about things. That's how he came up with ideas. That's how, where his, the muse of his thoughts. Okay, the muse is kind of that idea, that the personification of an idea, as a person. The muse being was it like a Greek angel or something? Like a Greek, not an angel, but like a Greek figure, I guess, if you want to say. It wasn't a god, I don't think, but it was basically the inspiration, what would sing during a lot of the Greek myths and plays. You'd have a muse, and so we say that, there's a muse that is inspiring you, right? There's something, almost like a fountain, right? Because you can describe your ideas as fountains. And sometimes something that can inspire you can be like a muse. It can be like a woman, basically, that inspires. You see a woman, sometimes a woman can inspire you, right? It makes you feel, it gives you the idea, right? And so it also alludes to the idea of how women affect, right? How they change the world through their influence. Now, so what else? What else does Bill Gates say? Okay, Bill Gates recommended a book, The Anxious Generation, by New York University social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, which explores how smartphones and social media have rewired kids' brains. I agree that social media plays a role, but I don't know. I mean, I think thinking is a separate thing. I think this topic, I love thinking about this because I've thought about this, and the idea is, I think there are thinkers, and um, not everyone has that skill. It's a skill, just like learning how to type fast, learning how to think, learning how to think about something and find a solution. That's part of that's what you do in math. That's what you do in science. And some people, they never learn that. Like you can read books. You can do really well in school. You could be a straight A student and not think. I know that sounds crazy, but the reason why is because some people, they just learn formulas and they just learn how to do, but they never go through the process of critical analysis. And so as a society, we need to encourage people to disagree, basically. Encourage people to play devil's advocate. Do the opposite. Try taking on a different point of view. Believe it or not, that's more important, in my view, to what Bill Gates is talking about than anything else. And it'll help you because it helps you see the world around you. And it helps you hopefully find yourself closer to the truth. If there is, if you can find that. But being able to at least be able to express ourselves, that's kind of what, I think that's what helps a thinker. But really, it's what helps people come up with new ideas. And as far as thinking, not everyone has the skills to think. And so the ability to think and analyze and come up with new ideas, that comes from spending hours. And without spending those hours, I don't believe that you can become a thinker. And so there is that, like, you have to go through that process. So I agree with Bill Gates in that regard. Like, you have to go through the process of thinking, of spending hours thinking. I don't even think books are required, because I think all you need is to be able to have a critical mind and to be able to think on your own. And then what will happen is that you'll be able to do that later on. You will be able to call upon that skill later on, whenever you need to solve a problem later on in your life. So anyway, Gates touted his play-based, which inspires creative thinking. Research shows over the phone-based childhood, play-based childhood versus phone-based childhood. I mean, I don't know. I think the problem with phone is it's no different than before. I mean, previous generations, they had TVs, analog TVs, they had PCs. I mean, how different? We're not that much different. If anything, the only problem with phone, I don't know that I agree with this, actually. The problem with phone is not that it's digital or that it somehow, it can be just as inspiring as real life. I mean, a lot of what goes on, when you play a phone, when you're playing a video game, it's actually, it's turning into, it digitizes the real world. A lot of it is just an imitation of the real world anyway. But it's just in a lazy way, of course, because you're just looking at it and just touching it, as opposed to, being physical with it as you would in play. But the problem, I think, is not that. I actually don't think that's the problem. The problem is, I actually think phones are inferior. And this is something that Bill Gates hasn't talked about in this article, or that this article doesn't talk about with regards to Bill Gates. But I actually think the phone itself is slow. The phone, it's just inane. There's something, like I don't have a problem with digital things as long as it's fast. Like, I wouldn't mind if someone was playing with a Mac or a PC in this regard. But speaking of PC, I feel like, maybe Bill Gates, obviously he's not the leader of Windows anymore, but PCs have really fallen. They're kind of like wannabe Macs without the benefits of Macs. Like, it doesn't make sense what Windows does nowadays, but unfortunately, like, whatever, that's a criticism of Windows. But I feel like Windows computers is horrible now, just because they don't have, I don't know, I mean, anybody who's used a PC, it's like the worst of all worlds. They try to be like Apple, but at the same time, they're very limited, and they don't have the freedom of Apple. And at the same time, they do all the stuff that Apple does just to copy them, and it's crazy. But anyway, and so, that could be another video, actually, for Windows, how Windows today is so different. I prefer old Windows, the old Windows computers. But anyway, going back to this. So the phones, right? we're talking about phones. What's the problem with phones? And the problem with phones is that they are boring. Isn't there? Or I should be more specific. They are slower is perhaps the better. It's not that they're boring, it's that they're slower. The way that you touch them and the way that it's slower than the mouse. The mouse and keyboard is fast. Even typing is fast once you learn how to type. And I wouldn't mind, for example, a child playing, because that's what Gen X and millennials did when they were young. That's what Bill Gates, that's kind of his generation. Bill Gates was playing with computers. You were playing with computers, Bill. Like, it's just that the computers were so much better than the phone. They're faster, right? It's like, have you seen those kids that play StarCraft, right? Like they're super fast. Like mouse and keyboard is super fast, way faster. Like our brain is fully capable of taking on a lot of information at the same time, and almost like magic. And the phone prevents us from doing that. The phone is just slow. It's sluggish. It's Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is sluggish. Like even this right here, look at how slow this scrolls. You can see how this is slow. This is a slow experience. It slows us down. The phone has slowed us down. You can see here, look how slow this scrolling is. It's so much faster on a PC. Like PC, you can do things almost like 10 times faster. Well, maybe not 10 times, but like multiple times faster. Like 2 or 3, 4 times faster. It's so much faster. And I would say it's almost instantaneous. It's amazing how fast we can be. But the Wi-Fi is so slow, and I don't know why. I guess because we invested so much money on Wi-Fi. I don't know why we had to go down this route. But yeah. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I kind of disagree. I think the problem with phones is that they're just too simplistic. It's not the phone itself. It's not the digital. Because at the end of the day, digital or physical, it doesn't matter. I really don't think so. And that being said, you also want people to just, stand up and do things, because that's the reason why play, I think, is important. It's not because, there's something better about play, because no, play is a waste of time too, but at least it's physical. At least you're doing stuff, and it makes it more likely that you'll do things. Whereas if you have a person who is always just sitting, that you're not going to want to do anything. You know what I mean? It's like when you're doing a science experiment, you got to get up, you got to make things, you got to twist things, you got to grab supplies, you got to put them together. There's something different about actually physically doing something versus just sitting down the whole time, right? So you kind of want people and students to get the opportunity to do something, even if it's just getting a job, believe it or not, even if it's just like working at a restaurant or something. It's pretty, like, you would think, like filling sodas and something and scooping up ice and, doing stuff. It just helps your motor skills, I guess. It helps you to get things done as opposed to someone who hasn't done anything, right? Because otherwise you're just going to have these great ideas, but then you don't know how to start, you know what I mean? Because you've never started, and that can cause anxiety itself if you've never practiced. So I agree with that with Bill Gates. All right, let's see. Our attention spans are like muscles, and the nonstop interruptions and addictive nature of social media makes it incredibly difficult for them to develop. I mean, I don't know about that, because sometimes when you're on social media, right, you'll spend like an hour reading an article. So I don't know that the attention span is always bad or that that's the issue. I think most people are capable of having the attention span, but a lot of it, I think, is just what we're used to. And I kind of agree that when it comes to not just with social media, but really with movies, right? Our movies, they're super fast. I mean, why do they have to be fast? It's because people, it's not because of social media. I don't think it is because of social media. I think it's just our society, for some reason, has decided that faster is better. But really, when you're watching movies, slow down. I can appreciate, when you watch Stanley Kubrick's, what is it called? I can't remember right now. But, the famous movie, right? The Out in Space, the 21st? Oh, man, I'm off the top of my head. What is it? 20, it's not 20,000 Leagues. It's like 20 something. You guys know what I'm talking about. Well, anyway, it's a very slow movie, right? It's a space movie. The Space Odyssey, whatever it's called. 20 Space Odyssey. No. 21 Space Odyssey. I can't remember what it's. But anyways, you guys know what I mean. So the Stanley Kubrick, right, space movie, it's very slow. It's very slow compared to what we see in movies today. But I appreciate it. And it's really, people keep saying like, oh, there's something wrong with us. But really, I mean, there's nothing to do. Seriously, just make it. I think we should just make just make content that isn't so quick and that you can appreciate and absorb. And a lot of people, I agree that a lot of people are saying, oh, it's too slow, it's too boring. Well, I don't care. Just make it. Like, it doesn't matter. Just make the content. That's what I say. Look, I don't follow the trends. And I think when it comes to movies, stop following the trends. Just make the movie. When we talk about attention spans and interruptions, yeah, you're right. It might not be what's popular or what, and so just do it anyway. I don't know. I think you should just ignore and just eventually get people to get used to it. Teach people that when it comes to art, like, you need to adapt to the art. It's not the other way around. The art doesn't adapt to you. Okay, I don't adapt my content for you. You need to come down to my level. Okay, that's how it works, right? That's how I think it works. Whoever is listening right now, right? You need to come to my level. I don't have to reach you. And I think it's the way that we're approaching it is wrong, right? So people need to just learn how to slow down. They need to learn how to get their attention span. You can change. You can choose. I don't know that it's. I mean, I agree. It's like a muscle, I guess. But I guess what he means is that they're neural connections. You can do both, is what I'm saying. And so, committing to uninterrupted concentration. So, throughout his career, Gates has frequently credited his success to his voracious reading habit and ability to self-isolate. Now, I don't know that reading is necessarily, like I said, I don't know that that's necessarily important. Reading to me, in my view, is not actually the most important thing, to be honest with you. And that's just my view. And I say that because this was something that even the Greeks, I think it's Plato, in Plato's Republic, or one of the books that Plato wrote, or it was Aristotle, that basically reading is not that great, to be honest with you. Yeah, like reading, you're just grabbing information that somebody could say to you. But really, at the end of the day, I think Bill Gates is correct when he says that thinking is really, it's not even about reading. I actually think the thinking is more important than the reading. Because the reading, you're just taking other people's information. I mean, that's good, and I want you to do something with it, and it helps you to express yourself, but eventually the eventuality of reading should be that you are giving back, and that not only are you giving back, but you are creating. And so, I mean, yeah, it's good to read, but I would rather you create, to be honest with you. Because the reading should only be a tool to help you to create later on. So I would say, voracious reading, it's good, don't get me wrong, it'll get you up to speed. But then at some point, use that skill, right? In the 1990s, the then Microsoft CEO would even retreat to an isolated cabin in the wilderness with nothing but a big bag of books and technical papers for what he called his annual Think Week. All right, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, he wrote in his blog post, those periods found Gates committed to uninterrupted concentration. He wouldn't even check his email so he could read, think, and write about the future without interruption. He added, and I agree with this. So yeah, he's thinking, right? So see, I mean, reading is good, but you gotta think, and that's something that happens outside of reading. When you're thinking, you're not just thinking what you already thought or what you already read, but you're thinking what is just coming up in your mind. And so that's what you are practicing. You're practicing, life is not just about making connections to things that have already happened, right? Isn't that how they, it's 2024, and isn't that how they structure AI, what they call AI, but it's, generative AI, where they just tell the AI this is what it is and this is that, and now make that connection. And to me, that's just such a simple way of doing it, because the reality is, in life, you need to create new things. It's not about combining things. Sometimes you have to create something entirely different altogether that doesn't exist. That's what I'm asking you to do. And for some reason, that's one thing that I don't think AI will ever do, to be honest with you. And it's sad to say that, but it's true. I think the creators of AI don't want it to do that, to be honest with you. I think they want it to be kind of a tool for doing what's already been done and what's already been curated. So I actually think AI is always going to be substandard. I'm not very hopeful for it. I think it's kind of useless. And I say that because, and I've talked about this before on this channel, but I think AI is just, it's not allowed to ever be the free escape that it could be. I don't think it will ever be allowed to be that. And so therefore it's pretty useless. And so what I mean is, I don't need you to synthesize. Synthesize means to put together things that already exist, or to be able to organize things that someone else has already said, which is typically what AI does, right? It'll just grab what somebody has said about something and then just regurgitate it. I don't need that. That's completely useless. I want something that makes something completely different and shocking, and it is going to be shocking because it's completely different. It's something that's never existed, and yet it happens. That's what I want. That's what you need to do. That's the whole point of thinking, so you can make something new. Because at some point, somebody had to come up with everything that exists. Somebody had to come up with that idea and put it into practice. And so I don't believe in this idea that everything just comes from somewhere. No, there are inspirations, but then there are also things that happen that don't exist, and yet they came to be because someone thought about it. All right, so let's see what else it says. We must create an environment that gives us the ability to focus our minds without interruptions from coworkers, spouses, children, pets, and technology, or we'll never be able to concentrate on high-order activities. I mean, it's not just about concentrating. I think it's about thinking. And so I really think Bill Gates got it right. Like, yeah, concentrating, that's something you can do. I mean, technically, you're concentrating on your phone when you're looking at it. And I don't know, everyone's addicted to phones, but I don't know, phones, I'm not very, phones are with us all the time, and we're forced to use it. That's what's crazy, is that the reason why the phone is so ubiquitous is because we're forced to use it. I wish we didn't have to be honest with you, but we're forced to. A lot of the apps, a lot of the, if you're at a job, if you're checking your schedule, whatever you're doing, it's on the phone. Anything financial, anything to do with your life, the apps, right? There's an app for it. And so it forces us to use it. But really, I mean, the reality is the phone, it's useful, but it's not. The problem with the phone is that it's too slow. And so it actually gives us a false sense of like this powerful computer. We're so powerful. Like, no, it's the opposite. We're slower because of it. And so I agree with that. I agree that the phone itself, you should use it as little as possible. And most of the stuff, like a lot of these games, some of them are okay, but most of them, they're very simplistic mini games. Everything that the phone does is just mediocre. I don't know. It's not as fast as it could be. But the problem is, most people, it costs money to do anything else. And so the phone is kind of the bottom of the barrel. It's basically the lowest. It's kind of the lowest barrier of entry, I guess. And so, you pay your phone, right? It costs like $1,000 or whatever, or more. And then of course you pay monthly for it. But the thing is, with, if you want to buy a computer, right? A PC or a Mac. See, I wouldn't be opposed to someone using a Mac all day because it's way faster. You would actually learn quite a bit using a Mac. But the problem is it's too, it's expensive, and most people just aren't going to spend that kind of money today. They don't spend the money. And so that's the problem. And so the investment is in technology. It's not actually that the technology is not needed or that it's bad. It's just that we don't have we're using a very slow device. The phone is a slow device. I'm sorry, but it is. I think it is anyway. And so what that means is that it it kind of makes us feel. The other thing too is that we have this hubris. Okay, hubris is pride. And that pride in that we feel like we're better, we feel like we're smarter just because we have something on, that we can just touch with our finger and it happens. But the truth is, what we do is just simple stuff that, yes, it makes it faster, but at the same time, it's like some things are faster because of the phone, but then our society has somehow structured itself in such a way that everything else is slower. So even though our phone is fast, the software is slow. And it really is slow. Let's just be honest. It's not as fast as PC. A PC is faster. But the thing is, the PC requires, you got to invest in a room. You got to invest in you got to type. Or I should say, you have to have a big monitor. You got to set it up. And people are just not willing to do that nowadays. And so now you don't get the fast experience. And so we actually have a bunch of computer illiterate people. You would think that we would be more technological. We're actually less technological, in my view. And that's kind of, I don't know. I don't know what the solution for that is, other than to tell people like, hey, like Macs and PCs are better, use it. I'm not opposed to that. If you haven't used Macs and PCs, you really should. They really speed up the workflow so much. And yet, even so, I would say that so much of, they're changing the Macs and PCs to be more like phones and tablets. And I think that's another criticism. They're turning them slower because they want them. I don't know why. It's almost like it's like their brains aren't fast enough. And so they want to slow everything down and it slows our economy. It slows everything. So yeah. Now Gates' week of intense focus helped spur big ideas, including Microsoft's development of the Internet Explorer browser. Okay, we all know. Well, you might know about Internet Explorer. According to the Wall Street Journal, now at the time, Internet Explorer was kind of big, although eventually it, became infamous, I guess. But that's a while ago. People don't use Internet. I don't even think it exists anymore. They replaced it with Edge. But anyway, now the technologies Gates and Microsoft help popularize, risk preventing the deep thinking that people need to spur similar innovations, according to the billionaire. So I don't know. I kind of disagree. I think it's okay to have, you want to be balanced, but I think it's the phone itself is a problem. So I disagree. I don't think it's bad to be kind of a fast StarCraft player with a mouse and keyboard. I actually think the software is what's slowing us down. And my criticism here, and I know Gates is not really in charge of Windows anymore, but really Windows is part of the problem because they're slow. They are slow machines. Like Windows, I can't believe, a lot of it is by design. It's not even just like, yes, the hardware is super slow, by the way. When you buy those $300 Walmart PCs that are full of like bloatware, they're super slow. Like they're so slow. It takes like 30 seconds for the startup screen to load, and even when it's like waking up from sleep, and even to start anything to start programs, it takes like a few seconds. It like scrolls. Now I understand they're very cheap or whatever, but the thing is, even like Windows 95 or whatever, they weren't like that. So there's no excuse for it. I really do think it's a software issue. It's not a hardware issue. Like, it's not a hardware issue at all, because I remember, when you had like Windows 2000, Windows 95, they were not that slow. They weren't. Even you could buy the bottom of the line computer, it would still load fast. So it's a software issue. It's the hardware is fine. And then the other thing too is not just the hardware, but when you're dealing with computers nowadays, Windows specifically, it just doesn't have, it's not it's not focused on speed anymore the way it used to be. And a lot of it is because, as weird as it sounds, Bill Gates, I think Bill Gates might not be talking or might not be realizing that most of these companies, they don't want you to just come in and leave. They want you to stay a while. It's almost as if, Like they want your attention, is so to speak. Everything, and that's how everything is in our society nowadays, is they've realized the longer they can keep you, the better. The more, in other words, the more they waste your time, the better. And so all of these social media, the apps, they're trying to waste your time. It's actually on purpose. And I would say that even Wi-Fi, the frustration of seeing that scroll, like even if we wanted to do things fast, we could have done it. Like the world was faster 20 years ago, and I don't understand. Everything was faster back then. Today, the Wi-Fi, everything is designed to slow things down. And that slows us down. It slows everything down. But we haven't even realized, we just get used to it. And in a weird way, we like it better. I know that sounds really bad, but I feel like Bill Gates doesn't realize that not only do companies want us to waste time, but it also, in a weird way, it feels better for consumers. And I know that sounds weird. It's kind of like, I guess maybe it's like, I don't know. I don't know what I get, maybe like Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. Like maybe people like the grind. They like feeling like they've done something. They like wasting. In other words, instead of doing something in a split second, people would rather wait 20 seconds. Believe it or not, which is insane. Like, why would you want to waste your time? But yet, that's how people approach life. They want to waste time because it makes them feel important. And in my view, this is where I'm using my own thinking mind, right? Just as Bill Gates said, right? And the truth is, I think that's nonsense, okay? Yeah, you feel that way, but you know what? You don't have to feel that way. And in fact, you shouldn't. You should be wanting things to be happening in a split second. And I'm going to tell you something, as someone who works with computers, and I've made programs, and I've done all this, and I'm going to tell you something, it's super fast. I think people don't realize how instantaneous things happen and could happen, and our world could be so much faster. Like phones, it should just be, as fast as you can touch, and then you're out. It should be that simple. You should never have to look at your phone. You shouldn't have to look at it because there's nothing, but that's a design problem. I wish, like that's a design problem. That's not a that's not a phone problem, believe it or not. It's the way that the software is designed so that it's slow. Okay, so without the ability to focus intensely and follow an idea, wherever it leads. Okay, we're continuing to read here. The world could miss out on breakthroughs that come from putting your mind to something and keeping it there, even when the dopamine hit of a quick distraction is a one click away. So I agree with this, like in a sense that, you need to be able to focus, you need to be able to do things. But the issue here is that it's not about dopamine. I mean, it doesn't matter about the dopamine. I really think this is a software issue, and it's also a cultural issue. And it's also, and I agree that, yes, we do need to think, and it's about thinking. But how do you build those thinking skills? And at the end of the day, I really don't think it is about reading or you could be a reader and not think. In fact, if anything, reading is the ultimate form of non-thinking because you're just passive. You're just taking things in. No. I believe that thinking is something that comes from within you. So you have to do it. And yes, books can facilitate that. Books can give you something to bounce off of. And so, yes, in that regard, books are good. But really, at the end of the day, you have to be the one to think. You don't actually need a book to think, believe it or not. You could just think right now, Bill. And I wish Bill Gates had realized you actually didn't need to escape and go to a log cabin. You didn't have to do all that. You could have just locked yourself into your room, turn off the lights, and think. That's all you had to do. The same thing that every other person, that caveman in the middle of in a dark cave, that's all you need. You need is that empty cave, right? The proverbial cave. What is it called? The cave of darkness or whatever. That's part of the Greek. That's a Greek philosophical thing. But basically, when you're inside the cave, right, you can come up with all kinds of ideas. Like your imagination runs wild, actually. So the thing is, you need to be able to think for hours. And to be able to think, I agree with that. That is an amazing skill. And that will, again, and so in a way, books are a hindrance to that because books are going to influence you. Sometimes you don't want to be influenced. You want to come up with things on your own from scratch. And so in order to do that, lock yourself up, in that proverbial cave. You don't need to do any of it. You don't need to do anything, to be honest. Now, eventually, you can use tools, like, and I would recommend PCs or Macs, right? Anything with a mouse and keyboard. But really, um, essentially, what you want to do is, in order to think, like, you're right, you do need to learn how to think. You have to think. That's the first off. But the second thing is, you have to go through that process. And a lot of people are afraid of being by themselves. A lot of people never have the opportunity to be by themselves. A lot of people, either they work too much or they hang out too much. Ironically, I mean, Bill Gates said that, you got to go outside. I feel like people do that too much, to be honest with you. This generation, you kind of need to lock yourself up. Don't be afraid to say that. And if you don't, then I guess you're not going to be a thinker. And if you're not a thinker, then I don't know, you're just not going to be a thinker. You never learned that skill. And that requires solitariness. And this is why this is the importance of people who are, your Emily Dickinsons, people these hermits that lock themselves up in their room. They have a role to play in our society. And that's not something that most people can do. And you're not going to be able to compete with, Stephen Hawking, who sits in a chair all day and thinks while you're playing around. You're not going to be able to compete with Stephen Hawking's. Right? So you're not going to be able to compete with certain people. And I think Bill Gates might not realize that, there are people who have spent hours thinking and they're amazing at focusing. And the truth is, for people like that, I don't know, you have to go through that process. So it's not something, it's like we're trying to encourage people to do it. It's not something you encourage people to do. I mean, you either do it or you don't. And most people are not going to do it. And therefore, most people are not going to be thinkers. And so the few people that are thinkers, maybe focus on trying to bring them into the fold, because oftentimes, right, let's just be honest, in our business culture, it doesn't promote that. It doesn't, it doesn't encourage people it doesn't encourage all kinds of people to come to the workplace, right? When you go to the workplace, what do you have? You have all these, rituals. You have, let's say, you're expected to do meetings, you're expected to do public speaking. I mean, what does public speaking have anything to do with thinking? Do you know what I mean? And yeah, it's a good skill to have. Obviously, you want people to be well-rounded, but most people who are going to be thinkers are not going to be very good at public speaking, and vice versa. Most people who have amazing social skills are not going to have good thinking skills. So it's kind of this weird, you need a variety of people, I guess is what I'm saying. And that we need to redefine what it means to be successful in the business world. And just in society in general. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a hermit. If you want people to think, and you value that, and I do, right? Well, then be more accepting of hermits. Be more accepting of people who have locked themselves up and have put in the time to learn how to think. And then also realize that, if you're a thinker, you can't be good at everything. So you're going to be bad at other things. You're going to be bad at simple things that other people can do easily, and vice versa. It works. That's why you need a variety of people. And that's why there's no, when I think of, this is how an ideal employee should be, that doesn't exist for me. There's no ideal. There should be a variety of people in every environment. And I wish that the HR people and the people who are hiring and the people who are in, because this plays a role in who the company has. And I wish they were all on board on the idea that, all of the rules that they have for what makes, how business should be done is nonsense. Because really, you need a little variety of everything. That's the truth. And you need to work with a variety of people, and you need to be able to find talent however it is. And some people have amazing thinking skills, but they have really bad skills and they will always have those bad skills. And so therefore, learn how to accept them, accept people in their awkwardness. And likewise, and I disagree with this article, because this article basically makes it seem as if, well, just think a little bit and then you'll be like me. And I don't agree with that. In fact, let's just be honest. Most people are never going to be thinkers. And it's not something that you can practice. They make it seem as if, well, you know what, here, just read this book and then just think a little more, and then now you'll be a thinker. And somehow, like, and that's not how it works, in my view. I think it takes hours and years of practice, and most people do not have time to do it. Most people are probably not going to do it, and most people don't even know how to do it. And in order to get to that high level of thinking, it takes years of practice. Some things take years of practice. And so the thing is, like, that's going to sacrifice everything else in your life. And so most people would rather have a more balanced life. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't like this article because it makes it seem as if, well, if you think a little bit, now you're a thinker, and it's like, no, that's not how it works. And if anything, I don't think it's helpful, to be honest with you, because it's not just something that you can just do. It's not something that you can just practice. You don't just go to the cabin just once a month or something. It's something that it has to kind of come from within, and it has to be a skill that somebody chooses to spend years honing, right? And then it's only, but the thing is, most people, like I said, our society doesn't value that. So maybe that's another question, is the idea of what our society values. Does our society value that intellectual pursuit, that solitary hermit lifestyle? And so much of our culture refuses to do that. In fact, I would say that most cultures, actually, no, that's not true. Some cultures, like Japanese culture, they have entire cultures of people who just hide themselves out. And that's probably one of the reasons why Japan is able to succeed in ways that other parts of the world cannot. But in large parts of the world, it's looked down upon to lock yourself up. And so people are afraid of that. I don't know if Bill Gates realizes, but people are afraid of the hermit. They're afraid of, the mysterious, wise old person that just hides themselves out. It's kind of scary. And of course, you better be scared because they've thought about it. But of course, they lack a lot of deficiencies, right? They're always a little weird, right? You got the Yoda figure, right? In Star Wars, he's kind of weird though. He's not supposed to be cool. He's supposed to be weird, and he is. But anyway, in the movie, we see that hermit figure, and often they are strange, right? They're wily. They got wired hair. They're crazy looking. Because you are crazy, you're gonna turn crazy, and that's basically what you're saying, Bill Gates. Is, you know what? You got to be a little crazy, and I agree. But unfortunately, that craziness does not translate well into the business world, and it still doesn't. And I don't think, putting out books or reading and pretending like, you know what, I'm just going to read this book and do a little bit of thinking, and now I'm a thinker. And that's not how it works, And so I disagree with that. I disagree that it's something that you can just easily become. It's a sacrifice that you make, and most people are not going to make that sacrifice. And our business world is not prepared to accept people who have made those sacrifices. And so therefore, I actually believe that we're not going to get anywhere, to be honest with you. I don't, because the tools are not there. And I've already said how our society, or the technology itself prevents us, right? Like the phone itself is too slow. So, it's a design issue. It's designed that way. It's designed to be slow. We live in a slow world. And so that, my encouragement, I guess, is to, I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to invent it. I don't know. Am I going to have to invent a new OS that's super fast? I need a fast OS with Mac, with keyboard. And the Mac is the best right now. And so, so thank you, Apple, I guess. But otherwise, I feel like Windows has definitely slowed down. But yeah, going back to the business world, I mean, like I was saying, the business world, it's run by people, even Bill Gates admits, right, that most people don't think nowadays, right? Well, the people who are hiring, they don't think, so they don't understand. So they think it's important to dress up, dress the part, say the right things, be funny, I don't know, have public speaking skills. This is what they value, right? We already know you got to be a leader. You got to be confident. why do you have to be all these things, right? But that's all of those things I just described, right? What the business world values, right? And these are the people who are non-thinkers, as Bill Gates just kind of alludes or kind of implies, right? Is that most people are not thinkers, right? Unlike him, who was the CEO of an amazing company. And so then the next question that becomes, well, if these non-thinkers are the leaders and are the ones making the decisions and the hiring, well, then of course they're going to build a world that's non-thinking because they don't understand. And then not only that, but the business world doesn't value the skills because confidence, all of this stuff, this is all nonsense. This is all stuff that a thinker wouldn't have. A thinker's not going to be confident. They can barely, they've locked themselves into a cave. Of course they're not going to be confident. They're going to be afraid of the light. And so, but they're going to be thinkers, they're going to be, and so everything is a tit for tat. And that's why I'm not against, look, I'm not saying that everyone should be a hermit. I think there should be balance in life. But I also disagree with our business world and how they value dressing up and playing the part and speaking right and being confident. I don't value any of that, and any more than I do the weirdo. I see them just the same. And yet our business world refuses to, and so refuses to change or accept. And so it's like, and then not only that, but then when they refuse to accept the hermit and the weirdo, somehow the non-thinking people, they want to just pretend that somehow if they just engage in focused activity just for a few hours, that somehow they're going to be just like, or that somehow they're going to reach some level of focus. And I'm going to tell you, you're not. It's because it takes years of being a weirdo, and you doing it for an hour or going on a retreat for a log cabin, that's not enough, right? And you got to be like Bill Gates. When Bill Gates was young, right? Even Bill Gates describes it. When he was young, he put in the hours. You have to put in the hours. You got to skip the happy hour and put in the obsessed hour in, locked in your basement, right? And isn't that even a joke? Like, oh, you're locked in your mom's basement, right? That's a joke. That's actually like, yeah, it's acknowledged in our society, but it's acknowledged in a pejorative way, right? It's a negative, when really it should be a positive, just as, right? Like that's basically what Bill Gates is saying here. It's a positive. So anyway, but yeah, what I was going to say is, so, our society doesn't really value this. And I don't think this is going to change. It's interesting. It kind of probes into it. But I believe the solution is to accept people and to stop. But yet, it continues, Bill. And so it's a societal problem. Like, I agree. I think and this book is not going to solve, because what this book does is it basically tries to say we need to think a little more, but at the same time, we also need to, we need to also maintain the current business. And no, that's not how it works, And what I mean by that is you cannot be confident in all this. You cannot spend years, dolling yourself up and making yourself look a certain way, and then at the same time be a weirdo who is, or at the same time be able to compete with the weirdo that has spent hours locked up in their basement. Like, you can't do both at the same time. And so the solution is to accept both people. Do you know what I mean? It's not to pretend like somehow you can become that, which is what I believe. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about the current, the intelligentsia class, or if, I don't know what you want to call it. I guess and yes, of course it's admirable to, have people who want to be high, of the highest, you try your best to be as smart and as well-rounded as possible, right? And I agree with that, right? We all want our children or kids to be balanced, right? You want a little bit of everything. That makes sense. But I think we need to realize that in society, we need a little bit of everything. And I wish that the business world would be a little more accepting of people who are awkward and weird, and to stop saying that somehow it's better, because it's not better to dress nicely, right? Isn't this, this is the topic du jour, right? Where, you got to dress apart. Like, They're bringing that back. Why are they bringing that back, right? For many years, remember during in the 2010s, right? People started slacking off with how they were dressing. They started dressing sloppily, and that's why this is coming back, by the way. That's why they're trying to bring that back. Oh, you got to dress up. That's the one thing that, in my view, is a complete waste of time. Like, dressing up does nothing. Just from my logical mind, it does absolutely nothing whatsoever. Complete waste of time. Just like the waste of time phones do, just like when they make you wait 20 seconds, it's just not logical, right? We should just all be walking around in togas. Like, that would be simpler and better, actually. But, I mean, that's the thing. That's the world that we live in. And yet, for some reason, you're wasting time and energy doing stuff. And then you're wondering why your people aren't that intelligent or smart. And it's because you're wasting time. And my criticism is that, you know what? You want to dress people up? Fine. Pay me to wear a suit. You know what I mean? Buy me my suit. Just, I'm going to go to work. You give me the costume and there you go. I don't want to think about it. Right. And that's how any, like how is a hermit, how else are they supposed to approach it? And so that's what I'm saying. Like, if you want people speaking publicly, okay, well then how about this? Okay, you're going to listen to a hermit speak publicly? Okay, fine. Well, then you better get used to the stuttering and the, awkwardness of their speech inflection, because you know what? That's how they talk. How about you learn how to adapt to that? See, I'm not even critical of what's happening, but I'm critical of what we think is better, because those are skills, and yes, they're amazing skills, especially for actors. But you know what? Why do I need to become an actor to become a successful person? Right? An actor, yeah, they have the skill of oration, and to be able to say things and act and perform. And that's what we value in our society. We watch movies and somehow we think that's what success looks like. And then, just as Bill Gates mentioned in this article, it's not, right? Thinking intensely is what causes that. And a lot of actors are very intelligent, but they have that skill of speaking. But not everyone is going to have that skill. And so I think there's a place for everything. But like I said, there's a place for everything, but also we need to be accepting of how the different ways in which people operate. And if we want, just like Bill Gates mentions, we need to get people over there, or I should say, we need to, be able to think, right? We need to have a society that thinks. And in that sense, I'm saying that for people to think like that, it takes a lot of hours. It takes a lot of sacrifice. You're sacrificing your life. Time is finite. And so the better someone is at thinking, that means the less they are at everything else. And so the business world needs to accept that and stop sort of expecting that people be, that everyone be sort of the cookie cutter of what they think or what they think should be important. And actually, I would say that most of what the business world does is a waste of time, right? The dressing up, the public speaking, all of that's all a waste of time. Yeah, it looks nice. It looks nice in a movie, right? It feels nice maybe, but why? And the worst part is that you see them promoting it. If it was so important, why do they feel the need to promote it? Why do they feel? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that in the last few years they've been drumming up, oh, you got to dress the part. They put out these articles encouraging us to be this way. This is how, and the interview, right? How to interview, how to say what to say in an interview. None of that should matter. Isn't an interview supposed to be honest? You're not supposed to practice at all. There should be no practice. And yet the fact that there is proof that they obviously don't care about finding talent. They care about finding people who jump through these hoops and hurdles, and the hoops and hurdles are a waste of time. That's what I'm saying. And not only that, but it prevents people who are locked up in a cave. How is a person who is locked up in a cave supposed to know how to dress, how to talk, or what to say in an interview? And that's a skill in and of itself. And it's a skill that doesn't really add to whatever you're doing anyway, right? So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, yeah, there are some people who, yeah, they're going to be great, whatever. They're going to be great at, I think there are all kinds of people in life, and they can all succeed. And I wish that that was more accepted, I guess, is that, you know what? I don't see someone any different just because they look better or they talk better or they, I don't see them any different. And so, and in terms of intelligence, that's the thing. Like most, there's different forms of intelligence. So I don't necessarily think that, there's thinking people, but then there's also people who just get things done. And so sometimes the thinking can be important, but I mean, let's just be honest. In most work, like thinking is not required. So even what Bill Gates is saying, believe it or not, it might not even be necessary because most companies, they don't need thinkers. As sad as it sounds, I know Bill Gates, might come as a shock, but most people, they're not like Apple. You know what I mean? And so that's probably why. Maybe that's why a lot of these companies, they come up with these weird rules, is because they need to give themselves something to do. Because the reality is you don't need thinkers. I know that's sad, but if you want the thinkers, then you shouldn't you shouldn't expect them to be good at, at following the social rules or norms, because they're not intuitive, because they're not things that everyone knows how to do automatically. And so it's I don't know, it's a big topic, I guess, and I'm glad it's something I've always thought about, but I believe that there are things in our society, and our society continues to promote the opposite. And I feel like that's what Bill Gates is not realizing, that it's society that's actually putting the pressure against it, believe it or not. And that for some reason, our society also at the same time, even though they don't value the actual, people who lock themselves up and think, okay, the nerds, the weirdos, they don't value them, but at the same time, they still want to have their power. And they think that just by, you can be successful, you can dress up, you can do all that, and you can go on a retreat, and then you can be a little smarter. Like, no, that's not how it works, and that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're not going to become that, and you probably are not. And if you haven't already spent years doing that, you're probably not going to become that anymore. Your brain will not, because it's a skill. It takes years to develop. It's not something that just happens, and it stays with you. So I guess what I'm saying is there is an advantage for somebody who is, I guess the ideal, if you had to think of the ideal scenario, would be somebody who locks themselves up during their childhood, just like Bill Gates, and then later on in life they learn how to act right, but that took years too. But you already put in the sacrifice. Does that make sense? But for a lot of people, right, who had a normal childhood, right, they're never going to be able to catch up. They're never going to be able to do that. So why sell them that fake dream? They're never going to be smart enough. And yet they're still going to pursue the degrees. They're still going to go become doctors, and yet they can't think. Because it's a skill that takes years, and they never learned it. And this is the reality of society. And sometimes you can't reach that level. That's why some people but then at the same time, you can look at it another way though. Here's the truth, or here's how I see it, is that there's just too many variables, right? So just because somebody thinks a lot doesn't mean that they can implement it or they can make use of it. There are some people who, I'm almost certain that there are Mozarts, there are geniuses, there are Einsteins in this world right now. People who are amazing composers, and yet they don't know how to read music, and they've never even tried to. But in their mind, they have the potential to do it. And I really do believe that. I also believe that there are people who are Einsteins, who are amazing thinkers, amazing mathematicians, but because they've never put themselves in an environment where they could use it, they never became the mathematician that they could have been. Does that make sense? So in other words, I think There's just because you think doesn't mean that you know how to use it. And likewise, the people who don't think and are very good at and have the credentials, it doesn't mean that they can think either. It's just weird. It's weird how society is mismatched in that way. And so I don't know what the solution is. I guess the only thing I would say is with regards to this article is I agree. I'm glad that they can at least articulate and pinpoint, that thinking is a skill. So that's nice. I do like that. But like I said, I think our society doesn't value it. And I think it's going to continue not to value it. I don't know why. It's just a trend, in today's world, especially I would say in the last 5 years, right? Everyone is all about, oh yeah, you got to dress up like this. You got to talk like this. You got to do interviews like this. Just, again, they're promoting it. They're promoting the opposite. They're promoting, hey, let's waste our time doing all this stuff because it looks good, because it looks nice to be able to walk down the street and see people in full suits, carrying the fancy bags as if that's what business is about, right? I mean, and then you wonder why they spend all this time dressing and looking nice, and then meanwhile, some ugly weirdo who's locked up in a cave, that guy's ignored, even though that's probably that might be the solution to your problem in the business world. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe, and that's the thing. And our movies promote it as well, right? They always get the best looking Hollywood star. How about you get an ugly Hollywood star to play the role? You know what I mean? Like, why does it matter? I just want the smartest person. I don't want do you know what I mean? Like, our society doesn't. It just doesn't value what it should be. I don't know why. I don't know why we need to. I just don't understand the fascination. And the thing is, there's a push. There's a real push for it. I wouldn't even mind it if there wasn't a push, right? Like if people just dressed up because they wanted to dress up, okay, fine. But why is that promoted? Why is that pushed on us? And why is it encouraged in any way? And if you are going to encourage, at least pay for it. How about that? Pay. I'm like, it should just be like, but then, once again, it's expensive. Like that's, it's expensive either way. So anyway, but in terms of what people do with their lives, like I said, I don't think it's a simple thing. I don't think it's as easy as, well, you know what, just spend a few hours a day and then you'll be smart too, as if it's something that's just accessible. And I think even a very young person, you can't force it. You cannot force them. A young person is going to, they have to kind of discover it on their own. Because the other thing we haven't talked about with thinking is that thinking is not just about, like I said, it's not about reading. I disagree with Bill Gates there because he says, well, if you read a lot, you'll become. Not necessarily. You can be a reader. You can read hundreds of books and still not be a thinker. You'll just regurgitate. Some people just memorize, just regurgitate, just repeat what they already said, and then they didn't think. And so therefore, and like I said, you don't need books to think. You don't even need books to do this. You could just sit by yourself in a dark room and become a thinker. And yet for some reason, we don't want to promote that, right? Nobody wants to make a movie about some person that just sits there and just it stares out. And yet that's exactly what you need to be doing. But for some reason, we're embarrassed by that, right? We have to have that video of, Steve Jobs in a garage, working on something. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, but why don't you show people just thinking, just like the Greek philosophers did, right? Just thinking on your own, just like animals do. I mean, animals think too. Well, okay, I don't want to talk about animals, but like humans, we're talking about human intelligence. So humans, right? Humans, we think differently from animals. Yeah, we're not the same as animals. But anyway, what I was going to say, though, is why isn't that promoted? Why isn't that valued? And then the other thing, too, is that I don't think, what was the other thing they brought up? So, I mean, I don't necessarily think that, and then the phone, of course. The phone is, Yeah, the phone is okay, but it's slow. It's a slow process. So a lot of what we do is our society plays a bigger role in what's happening than we realize. And so our phones are slow, our software is slow, and that's what causes a lot of, the how we think. It affects how we think because it limits us. And for some reason, we see that um, the solution, we see ourselves through the lenses of technology, of current technology. And I believe current technology is purposely slow. Wi-Fi is slow, all of this is slow. And so the problem is the solution might just be to step outside of it. And I actually believe that, math is important. You should learn how to math. You need to teach yourself math because it's so bad. Like, it's so weird nowadays that you kind of have to teach yourself. I feel like I feel like the society today is designed to slow you down and to waste your time. They don't want you to, and so I don't know. You're just gonna have to teach yourself, is what I'm saying, which was weird. And of course, wherever you can, get the accreditation. If I think college still plays an important role, right? I think education is important. So yeah, but yeah, I just wish the society was a little more accepting of different kinds of people. So, um, anyway, for now, that is it. Hope you all enjoyed, and thanks Bill Gates for the inspiration, I guess.